let's go ahead and call the meeting to order. The first thing, the agenda, I would like to add a couple items to the agenda. Email came out today about, if you had a chance, an IEC annual meeting, the delegate and the IEC director nominations, ending that at the end at like 21. And then Dale went to a meeting this week. I was going to have him do a report out also on that. He went there on Tuesday, so put that at 22, if that's okay. And then after the adjournment, a short executive session. Any issues with those? Okay. Then is there approval for the agenda? So moved. Dale? Second?
Awesome.
Suzanne? Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Opposed.
I oppose. Record my name, please.
Okay. First, are there any questions on the information provided on the iPad? In the for your information section, anybody in the review come across questions they'd like answered?
Michael, I probably asked this before. Schomburg Construction, what is Schomburg doing for us?
He does all of our underground.
Okay.
On the check register, I think it was page 10. There was some tree trimming done on, Electricon on Circuit 3 of Santee. Wasn't that bid by Aspen? Wasn't Santee 3? So did we do 30% of that last year, and then they had the balance to do this year? There's a $69,600 check to Electricon.
I'll get that answer as we go through here, Jeff. So I think the question is did Electricom bid on the S3, right?
Well, no,
Did they do the work? Or
in the budget, we approved Santee 3 for Aspen, and 30% was to have been done last year.
Okay.
And we did the balance this year. So I'm not sure why we're paying Electricom to work on Santee 3.
Can you get that?
Any other questions? If there's nothing else, we'll move on to the safety minute. Brett?
So first safety minute is we had in Pop's Diner, we had a breakfast with Brett. It's kind of a neat story. So a member came there. He works for a operation west of town. Part of their strategic planning as a part of their operation, he was asked to he's basically in charge of all utilities. So he was asked to really understand the bills for all the utilities. And so he approached us at the breakfast with Brett. It led into Crystal meeting with them and going through kind of the Smart Hub capabilities, and then sitting down and kind of going through their actual bills, going through the tariffs to really understand kind of what drives their bills. It led into kind of some follow-up where we'll have Chris kind of work with them to understand what things they can do with their operations. So again, it's a neat story of someone just showing up at breakfast with Brett to engage with us, and it ended up with at least one working meeting at this point, and probably several to come. So the second one is we had some, so this year, obviously because the NRECA annual meeting is canceled, well, it's virtual, sorry, we received the certificates, so wanted to give those out. So the first one is Michael Brailage. So this is for CCD. So congratulations, Michael. CCD is the first certificate of director training. So if you take a suite of trainings, then you get your certificate. Carl Riedemann. Congratulations, Carl. And then the next level is the BLC program, and I don't know exactly how many trainings there is, but it's once you get the CCD, you can go for the BLC, and that's Jason. So congrats to all three of you. For the safety minute, something I thought was kind of cool. It was really, kind of safety committee work. Basically, our guys have a requirement from OSHA for high vis. So you have to wear high vis, and there's a specification for high vis. But for us to get that, basically what we have to do is wear, it's a vest. It's a reflective vest. We wear any time that we're working in the roadway. And so one thing we were thinking of is, there's always going to be that 1 or 2 seconds or that dependability on the human to make sure that you put this thing on, right? So in other words, if you transfer from the bucket, which you won't have the high vis on because you're going to have sleeves and everything on working, you won't have that high vis on. But if you come from the bucket and you go to the ground, you have to transfer into your high vis. So again, it's a human nature thing. How can we take the human element out of it? So one thing we came up with was to have just bright colored orange and yellow t-shirts. So they wear Decatur County REMC shirts today. And so what we decided to do was to have them all, they agreed, and they are all now, including Brian Keith, wearing, or will be, sorry, they haven't come in yet, but basically wearing some high-vis orange and yellow. Again, it doesn't meet the high-vis requirement on its own. You still have to wear the safety vest, but it's one of those, it's just another step that we want to take to keep our crews safe. I was looking up some statistics before this, and the amount of deaths per year by just drivers not seeing road construction workers or even just us, it's large. So it's alarming, and this is something that we thought was, an extra step just to take some of that human element out of it. So I thought that was a cool safety amendment, and I think we can all take something from that. If you're on a road, be aware, because not everyone's paying attention 100% of the time behind the wheel, unfortunately, today. So thought that was important. That's it.
We'll move on to the minutes. Anything, motion to approve the minutes, or is anything?
I would respectfully request on the minutes that the last paragraph where there was where it references my conversation with Mr. Peters, to expand that, and I don't know legally if we can include names or not include names, and I certainly don't want to violate anything there. But there was an acknowledgement that there was a previous, or at that meeting that we referenced, that there was a director in attendance at that. I think it was acknowledged. I don't think it's problematic to mention it. I would like to have that reflected in the minutes if we're able to do so.
I don't know any reason. So,
Jeff, were you the only director at that meeting?
That is correct.
Brian would have to get whatever wording you guys were suggesting.
Right.
Approve the, whatever you want there.
So do you have a suggested wording, or? No.
I'm looking.
No.
Something very simple. It needs to be. Something to the effect that the current director in attendance was noted as Jeff Lawrence.
Why don't you just take out board member and plug in Jeff Lawrence?
That's,
Keep it simple.
that's fine. I'm not opposed to it.
Okay. Anything else on the minutes? No, is there a motion to approve the minutes?
So moved.
Jason, is there a second?
I'll second.
Steve? All in favor? Aye. All opposed? Okay. Now we're going to move into a short executive session to go over, so I'm going to have to ask, just for a couple minutes, if I can ask everyone to step out in the hall that's not a board member.
Okay, so we are having a member appreciation slash EV electric vehicle event. This was our alternative that we came up with for our annual meeting. Since we couldn't do the annual meeting in June, we said we would do another member event later in the fall. So this is that opportunity for us to engage with members. October is co-op month, so that kind of correlates together. We'll do a big celebration for the month. The event will be drive-through style. Members will stay in their vehicles. We'll go through the details here. Register. They will receive a $10 bill credit, so we will register them just like we would at the annual meeting on the iPads. They'll get a $10 bill credit. They'll also receive an ice cream treat and a goodie bag. There will be an EV experience set up in the operations parking area. So 2 electric vehicles will be on site, provided by Hoosier. Hoosier will be here to answer questions and serve as the subject matter expert. We will not be driving them, sorry. But members could have an opportunity to see it, look at it, ask questions, learn more about it. This also coincides with the pilot, the EV pilot program that will be rolling out shortly. So if you want to go on to the logistical layout, so here's what it'll look like. The top is the drive-through. They'll go around through the drive-through circle. And then, we'll have 3 iPad registration stations just working through the line as cars come in. And then Brett and employees will rotate through giving the giveaway bag and ice cream goodies. Then they can either go out the drive or go on down through the gate and visit the EV cars. If we have a traffic backup, then we'll start looping traffic around the front of the building and this west side and back around, just to eliminate any traffic backup on the road. So we've asked employees to sign up to work. We have registration covered. We have a few other volunteers for that night. You all are welcome to attend and engage with members. We will be wearing masks when we're speaking with members, as long as that's in place by the governor. If that changes in a couple weeks, that'd be great, but we'll do what we need to do to keep everybody safe. And we will be rolling over what we had allotted for the annual meeting for bill credits and giveaways for this event. So it won't be additional dollars. I would anticipate it'll still be less than the annual meeting, so we should still be under budget. We won't have AV expenses, audiovisual expenses like we did at the fairgrounds. We don't have a rental fee for the fairgrounds. There are some other expenses that won't be incurred with this event that would have been at the annual meeting. So what questions do you have about it?
We were kind of talking through how many we thought. So Rush Shelby did their annual meeting drive-through voting with the bill credit, and they had roughly a little over 200 was the number. So if we get 150, I'd be happy.
I would expect we'll have a great turnout.
Yeah, I do too.
People are craving interaction right now and engagement, and if they can earn a $10 bill credit, I think they will be highly inclined to come. So I think it's going to be a great opportunity to have FaceTime with our members, build some excitement and engagement rolling into the winter season, and the Greensburg Decatur County Chamber hosted their golf outing, which no one else had hosted a golf outing, and they had a record turnout of golf teams. So I think people will come. When we used to hold a member appreciation event here, we would have around 400 attendees. So I would anticipate maybe 200, 250 cars.
It's unfortunate because we really wanted this event to kind of be here and have people be able to mingle and all that, but we just felt like, we said we were going to do an event, because of the bill credit during annual meeting, and we felt like it was not right timing to have something that's not sort of a drive-through style here. So it's kind of a mix. It's outside of the EV stuff. Would be kind of cool.
Any other questions about it? Are you excited about it? Will you attend?
Just curious, what EVs do you know what EVs?
2 Chevy Bolts and possibly a Tesla. So.
And then the Hoosier will be here, and we just had a meeting with them 2 days ago, and they've done a lot of research on EVs. So if someone has questions on EVs as far as a member, there's going to be a ton of information that they can gather through those 2 resources. So I feel like
They'll still need to stay in their car and talk to them.
Yeah, so.
Yeah.
they can get out.
So they can get out and look at them. Okay.
Yes, if you go to the EV experience, you can park over here where the guys usually park, and then get out and experience the vehicle. The Hoosier vehicle will be equipped. There will be one that they can get in and look at, and there's a sanitation kit that we'll have to, if people get in it and touch around, we'll have to clean it and sanitize it.
But for the most part, they will remain in their vehicle. And do you have an estimated time, Rachel, do you think it would, from the time they pull in to the time they got through? I mean, what's the elapsed time? Do you have any idea?
It kind of depends how chatty someone gets. But, I would say from start to finish, once they work around the registration line, stop at Brett's station and get their goodies, have a little, hey, how you doing, thanks for coming, I'm going to say 10 to 15 minutes.
We're going to try to do it. If you've seen Chick-fil-A lately, they're taking orders way up here. And that's what these aren't necessarily booths. These are people with iPads. So they'll be able to move around. If they can work their way back, we will.
Well, and given good weather and given the opportunity to earn a $10 bill credit for 5 to 10 minutes, you may
It'll
be
be-
pleasantly surprised.
I'm sorry, I failed to mention. So the date is October 30th. It's Friday, October 30th, 4 to 6. So after our working hours, we will be paying overtime. We won't need all 27 employees, but that will also allow people who get off at 5 an opportunity to come.
We thought 4 to 6 was kind of that sweet spot, especially on kind of a Friday. So.
That doesn't conflict with Halloween this year, does it?
Well, usually trick-or-treating hours would be, maybe start at 5 or 6, so hopefully there's not a huge overlap.
What's your registration process gonna be? Are you gonna mail something out and then you guys just scan whatever they bring, or you're gonna be like typing?
It's really easy on the annual meeting app. We're able to look them up quickly. They'll all be loaded. The membership list will be loaded. We just type in their name. We can search real fast. So there won't be, we won't be scanning anything.
So how are you informing the people to come in October? Is
So
something in the flyer?
there's a flyer in our October
It's this one.
Indiana Connection. So that ad is a full-page ad in the magazine, and we will have everything blasting on social media, the newspaper, starting October 1st.
But no bill stuffer.
There will be a bill stuffer for October also. Our traditional communication methods. So that's that. The Operation Roundup overview, this was requested back in March, or I think we were going to present it in March, but the schedule was full, so kept getting bumped. But here's just a quick Operation Roundup review. Amy Ewing is the program administrator. She wasn't able to be here tonight, but I just want you to know that Amy really runs the program. She does an awesome job, very detail-oriented. So Operation Roundup was established for a way to members to give back to the community. It's a trust fund separate from the REMC. How it works, members are automatically enrolled in the program. There is an option to opt out. So when they join as a member, they're automatically enrolled in Operation Roundup. When they go through the new member packet with our member service representatives, our member service representatives clearly define, and it's also defined in our membership packet, that they can opt out. So it's an easy, just say, hey, I don't want to participate, and we opt them out really, really quick. Members round up their bill to the next whole dollar every month, so it's no more than 99 cents a month. The max that they would give is $11.88 a year. Grants are awarded 2 times a year. The application dates are January 31st and July 31st. So those are 2 cycles. And then the trust board, which you all appoint a member from your district or the community. It doesn't have to be an REMC member. They are on the trust board and they review those grants and then award them.
Did we change?
You
that?
did change it, that's my bad.
Okay.
So there is a new rule that they do have to be a member.
Right.
But those who are already on the trust board were grandfathered in.
Correct, okay.
We didn't make them change out.
Okay.
So considerations to be awarded. It has to be a 501c3 organization. So they have to be a not-for-profit or a nonprofit. The organization program has to impact our territory. So the receiving organization doesn't have to be located in our territory, but they have to serve or impact members in our territory. The board looks at the maximum impact of the grant dollars. So how many people are being impacted by versus how much they're requesting. And then this is not, in the bylaws, but they typically look at if the focus is on youth, education, health and safety, hunger and poverty, or any other need that would arise that they feel is a need in the community. So we incorporated Operation Roundup in 1999. We awarded the first grants in 2001. And today, in 2020, we have aided over 107 different organizations And we've awarded 268 grants totaling over $503,000. So our members are making a huge impact in our community. And that is completely member-driven. Our interest, I think, in applications is growing. In 2018, we had 25 applicants. That's not awarded, that's how many people applied. 2020, we had 37 applicants. These are our communication and marketing efforts. This is how we're letting people know that the opportunity is there and how we're sharing who's awarded. So there's been increased communication in our publications, which includes our magazine and social media. Our website has the information on it. We've added the recipient recognition breakfast, which we did not do in March of this year due to COVID, but I'm sorry, we did do it in March because it was early. We didn't do it in August. And we're also doing press releases to our local media to announce the recipients. Applications on our website, we share it with all of our active organizations. We have a great relationship with the Community Foundation, with the tourism group. I'm on the chamber board, so they hear about it. Brett's on EDC board, they hear about it. Just being connected in the community helps share that opportunity. Do you have any other questions about Operation Roundup? Thanks for your support of the program. It's doing good work.
Thank you. Move on to CEO update, Brett.
All right, so first thing, let me get this, I'm gonna go through the metrics in a minute, but first thing, basically my time this month has been spent predominantly on kind of the planning for Mission Vision and our strategic planning event that's gonna be coming up next year. We also got the 2021 bids out for right-of-way. So I think there ended up being 4 different companies that we sent those all out to. We bid everything that we have left, basically, just to update all the pricing. We know we're not gonna be able to do it all next year, but we wanted to get updated pricing because we have pricing from last year. So looking forward for those to come in. The other thing we did, which you can't tell anymore because they took it all down, but we created a war room, which is in here when we're not in the boardroom, for the construction work plan. We've allocated, and I'll go into some more detail here in a little bit. We've allocated Chris's time to really spending on carving out the exact projects for 2021, dollars, timing, and then 2022 and 2023. So I'll go into more details in a minute, but my participation and Eric's participation has been well increased on that. Just making sure the dollars all aligned to what we're doing and kind of the timing. If you remember back in the construction work plan, there's a couple projects that are very high level. So aged ACSR is one of them. They didn't specifically say the A2 needs to be, or sorry, the C1 feeder 2 needs to be reconductored. They just said, we know we have a lot of reconductoring. So getting those designed and ready to bid out is kind of what Chris is working on when I talk about this war room. So that's kind of what I've been working on. As far as the metrics, I wanted to go over this a little bit. So from an August standpoint, if you see here, temperature was a little lower than our average. So about 4.7% less than our 4-year average. This is our monthly billed meters. So up to August, you can see there's been an increase from January to August, kind of inconsistent with, or very consistent with prior years. It's up about 1% from the beginning of the year as far as billed meters. If we look at our outage information, so we track something that's called daily SAIDI, and it's called a TMED value. What it is it's a statistical value that looks at anything that's statistically above this number is what they consider a major event. And so, like during the ice storm, that was a major event. So this year, altogether, we've basically had one where it went over, anything over this orange line would be considered major. So you can see on April 8th, the storm we had with high winds, that was considered major. Other than that, it's been below what we would consider a major event. What did August look like? So we track outages in two methods. One is lost consumer hours, which takes into consideration the time from off till the time on. So that includes drive time, everything. You can see from an August standpoint, it's pretty low, pretty quiet compared to a normal August. And then the number of outages is the other way we look at it, just purely the number of outages not associated with time. Again, you can see it was a pretty quiet month in August as far as outages. The other thing on outages that I didn't show here was, and I think it's always kind of neat to understand kind of from the last month what were the big drivers of those outages numbers. And so number one was vehicle and machineries for last month. And then right behind it was trees not in right away. And I think what we're seeing is a lot more of these emerald ash borer trees, to the point where we almost thought about like tracking which one are the emerald ash borers, but that can be tough too. But anyways, that was like our number 2 for last month as far as outage causes. So it's vehicles and machineries, so that's wrecks, combine hitting, whatever, and then trees not in right away. The other thing I thought I would show was disconnects. So obviously we were during the moratorium, we couldn't disconnect. We get into August and you see the spike. So I thought that was interesting. A lot of them were by callers, obviously. Then we had some field and then some prepay. The other quick look that I wanted to talk about, which you guys saw the 30, 60, and 90 days. I'm showing up here the 30 and the 90. So you can see in August when we basically did our disconnects, it dropped the 30-day almost in half. And then our 90 days didn't drop it in half, but it did drop it pretty considerably. And then from a safety aspect, we wanted to get 22 crew visits done by the end of the year. As of August, which we've done some in September, obviously, but as of August, we were on 11, so we're about halfway. You can kind of see the spread that we're doing there. Pat tells me we'll be able to get these done to what our original plan was. These are very important. It's a goal we set that we wanted 22. It's also a goal that we submitted to IEC for our certification that we were going to get 22 done. So these are all, we go out, we have an app that we use, we ask specific questions, we're looking for specific things, we document them in our safety committee meeting, and that's what those are. Last is our near misses and corrective actions. So as a metric, what we're basically tracking is the recorded near misses and suggestions is kind of all in one. You can see it's always bigger in Q1. That's when we did our safety survey to all employees saying, hey, is there anything we can do to be safer? So we usually get a big bunch of those right here, and then we work them throughout the year. And then the corrective actions that we put in place. So how many of the suggestions, near misses, have we actually implemented corrective actions for? There's 7 of those total. There is about 3, I want to say, still in process that we're waiting on getting completed. So not every one of these blue ones will equate into a corrective action. It may be just something that, hey, we're going to make everybody aware of this, but there's not necessarily a corrective action. So that's the metrics. I'm going to keep rolling here, okay? As far as our projects, so these are projects coming out of our strategic planning. First one we just talked about, which is the front lobby concerns. So I think we know what we're doing there. The construction work plan. So kind of give you an update there. I told you we were working on we have a war room that we're really digging in and getting the finite details for every project that we plan on doing, when, in the dollars. We do have bids that came in yesterday for the C2A1. Carl, that's the one that comes over the interstate there down by over you. That one is bid, and we do plan on finishing by the end of the year. I think we had 3 bids, and Chris is working with those 3 to figure out which one we're going to go with. But that is something that we will complete by the end of the year. And then as far as the 2021, we have projects out for bid on those for next year. So hopefully we'll start seeing those bids come in. The idea is that we get those in by November. We're trying something a little different. We're trying to get all the bids for the projects that we're doing in 2021 in this year, so when we get into budgeting, we know exactly what projects we're doing and how much they are. And again, I'll just recap on the construction work plan. Chris is 100% dedicated to this right now, so some of the other things that we had planned for him at this point, we're kind of putting on the side. He's 100% dedicated to this. Okay, next project is the catch-up pole replacement project. So we have 79, roughly 79 of the 188 poles done. And our contractor, New River, is on track to saying they will get those completed by the end of the year. So the 188 that we are, those are basically 2017 and 2018. We are working on bidding 2019's and this year's rejections so that we'll have that again for the budget, which will be construction work plan projects for next year. As far as meter poles, we do have 70 meter poles left. At this point, there's 37 of those of the 70 meter poles, there's 37 of them that have pull top switches. Those are complicated meter poles that the member owns some of the stuff that's on the pole. Those are the complicated ones because it's going to take a member to spend some money in order for us to be able to switch that out. So we've not had great luck. Some of them we've been able to switch out. Some of them say, hey, I don't want to spend any money. It's working the way it is. We'll deal with it when it falls down, which isn't a good solution. So we are working on some ideas. It's something we're probably going to bring to you all because I don't think we're going to get very far on these 37. And some of them are very old as far as meter poles. And I think they're very old and been rejected for a while because there's a lot of member equipment on some of these busy poles. So we're coming up with some ideas. I think the liability that's out there on these compared to maybe we work with somebody, an electrician, to actually pay and have it done. So I don't know. We're going to come up with some options, bring it to you, and figure out a plan. Because I think if we keep going the way we're going with those 37, unless we can talk those members into spending money, we may have a tough time getting them changed out. So again, meter poles is something that we haven't bid out because those are ones that we're wanting to work with the members on because again, there's member equipment on it. We don't feel like if we bid this out to a contractor that would go real well. So
I don't believe a lot of those switches are needed today as they were needed 30 years ago.
I don't disagree.
So I mean, I would be recommending to most of those members not to replace it.
Yeah. You mean the pull top switch itself? Yeah. No, I agree. They don't make the parts for them anymore either. So if you have a problem with the pull top switch, you could be crafting your own parts for it, and they're not ours. It's actually the members' equipment. So completely agree. Ideally, we want to get away from the pull top switches. Go ahead.
Just on that, and we actually sell for $1 the
That's the meter base and
the meter base switch.
Yep.
Yeah. Okay.
It's interesting because I actually took a tour out with Pat, and most of these meter poles that we haven't got to, they're not the easy meter poles where you have, a weatherhead at the top with the overhead coming in, come down to the meter base, going down through a disconnect switch and then underground to the house. Most of them have, you got an overhead coming in from our overhead, and then you got it coming down to the meter base, then it comes down to the disconnect switch, and then it comes back up, 3 or 4 different lines coming back up, and they're going to different barns, all types of stuff. So those are the ugly ones that honestly are still out there and haven't been replaced because they're the complicated ones. We are getting to the ones that are, the easy 1 or 2 things on there. Those aren't too bad. And our guys are replacing, if they can, even if it's the members' equipment and there's not a lot there, we're replacing those, and the guys we're doing the work as opposed to having the member do it on the easy ones where all it is basically disconnecting it, put the new pull in, put their stuff back on. Anyways, I expect to see some options. I believe we're going to have to do something different if we want to get these done, and I believe there's some out there that we've got to get done. There's liability out there. So next is our communication strategy. You guys just heard October 29th we're doing October 29th we are doing a virtual town hall. It is going to be on the bill print, so Crystal will be helping on that one, and then we're doing the EV event on October 30th. So those are the three things from a communication standpoint. Bill reprint, Crystal, you want to go ahead and give that update since you're here?
Sure. We are moving right along. It's looking really good, so I think everybody should be pretty excited. We do have the charges all broken out now, so I know there were some recommendations from members where it would be a lot clearer if we listed everything. So our bills now list energy, actual demand, bill demand, average monthly power factor, all on the bill. And every rate is listed right beside the charge. So if you have 40 kW, you can read it, you can multiply it by the rate right on your bill, and it'll come up with your subtotal. So we're still working out some of the just some of the wording on some of the stuff. We have a section on the bottom that's called descriptions, and it actually lists everything that's on their bill that they're being charged for, a little brief description of what it is. So, because it's going to be new when people get this bill, and they're going to be like, oh wow, I have an actual demand and I have a bill demand and an average power factor now. What does that mean? So we put a little descriptions box on the very bottom that it's very brief. So if people understand electric at all, they'll be good. But if they don't, then that will probably cause them to call in. But that's okay, because that's what we want. We want for them to be able to understand that if their actual is 10 kW and their power factor is 70, they got adjusted to 15. And I want them to understand why that is. So if they can correct that power factor, then we're doing something good for them. So the bills are looking really good. So hopefully, maybe next month we can go over with you guys kind of the whole thing. But we are on track still to roll it out in the next 2 weeks. So fingers crossed.
And then the two last projects I wanted to talk about, and looking for some feedback from you as far as what our plans are. So there's two projects. One is called the CI idle service process. So if you remember, we were going to go back and look at and create a idle service policy. So today we really don't have one. What happens when we have, an old transformer, just old plant, and it's not being utilized, it's been dead? Do we leave that out there? It's on our books, it's part of our plan, it's part of our rate base. What do we do if it's out there a certain amount of time? Different co-ops, different utilities do different things with it. Some of them don't do anything. Some of them say after 5 years, the member has a decision. If they want to keep it, then they need to pay a certain amount. I don't know where we're going to go with that, but that is a project that we identified as part of the strategic plan. So there's that one, and the idea of that one was we wanted to have it completed by the end of the year, the idle service.
Brett, what's the scope on that? I mean, how much of that are you talking, idle equipment?
Basically, any service point.
But how many service points would you guess?
Oh,
in
there's,
that category?
We have like 720.
yeah, there's a bunch.
Really?
Yep. Now, some of those 720, and I could break this down if you'd like to see it. Some of those 720s are kind of regulars, we'd call them, right? So there's someone on, there's not for a couple months, and they come back on. The ones that I'm more interested in, which still could be a big part of that 700, is the ones that we know are no longer going to be used, right? So they're, again, it's part of rate base. It's a pole that is on our rotation list, so we're going to, it's part of our plans to replace if we don't do anything with it. So it's a good project. It's something that we need to do. The other project is what we're calling, it's the service and work order process, and I think Eric can attest to this a little bit too. So the idea on that one was it wasn't as high a priority as the idle service that I talked about at the time. So that one we were going to, service work order, we were going to basically start towards the end of this year and try to finish up sometime in 2021. We didn't actually have the timing, we just knew it was going to be sometime in 2021. What we're suggesting, and again, the idea of how these got prioritized is we have what we call a priority committee, and the priority committee takes into consideration 5 or 6 factors, I don't remember exactly what they are, and we rank each factor 1 to 5. There's a representative from each department that sits on this priority committee. We go through, and as a team, we kind of land on what we think each of those are. You multiply it out, it gives you a priority, you rack and stack them. So we think that this service work order one is much more important at this point. There's a lot of things, I always use the example that I don't know that there's one person that knows exactly what happens from an inception of a call to the end. It works, how we do it today, but as far as being streamlined and communicating well, it needs to be streamlined. It needs to be, you know, where we throw up on the board today, this is how it's done. We step back and we look at, okay, how would we redesign that process? So we think it's very important to do it. You know, there's a lot of savings from it would be hard to quantify, but just from a overall efficiency of that process. So what I wanted to have some discussion on is our thought was on the idle services to put this on hold to the beginning of next year and work on the service and work order starting now with the idea. I don't think we're ever going to get the service work order done by the end of this year, but it would be a lot sooner than if we started it in December. Again, the resources available to work this service work order probably aren't going to be available until another month. We think, and again, it hasn't been to the priority committee at this point, I wanted to get you guys' perspective on it, but we think that the service work order ought to be worked first. And then as soon as we get done with that one, we work on the idle service process. Again, that was based upon our feeling of what we think the priority committee is going to say now, because you know we're digging into this. Eric's been heavily involved in service work orders, and there's just a whole lot of communication efficiencies, just the whole process. When I say communication, it's not just communication amongst us, it's with members too, and that whole process just really needs to be looked at. So I don't know if there's any strong opinions either way. Again, I really want to take this to the priority committee and see what they say. It may come out that the priorities don't change, but our recommendation would be we put the idle service on hold, and then we work the service work order in the next month. We start that project.
My personal opinion, I like the switch only because to me that one is one that can affect members more.
Okay.
In a positive way. The other one can affect some members, but not necessarily in a positive way. So I like that one because that can affect members in a positive way.
We went out and did a study, and I don't have the numbers right off the top of my head, but we did a study on the idle services, and what we were looking at was to see how many of the idle services are actually still juiced, you know, how many of them still have power. And what we found is it wasn't that much. In fact, what we figured from the study that we did is you're going to spend more money sending somebody out to disconnect it than what you're really going to save as far as line losses with that thing being powered up. Now, with that said, Brian has a list of them, and if he's going by a location where we know one is live, or if we're doing patrols, we'll stop and do it. But to just send someone out, again, it does need to be done. We need to create the process. I think it is important. It came out of our strategic planning. All we're saying is let's hold that one off till next year. Let's prioritize the work order, service order.
I've personally dealt with both of those issues within the last 5 or 6 months, and I would say you're on track to switch.
Okay.
Just from personal experience, I think that's a good one.
I mean, we're still hand delivering, you know, Post-it notes as part of this process. And like I said, most of the time it works, but we need to use the system. And again, the only way we're going to be able to do that is to do an event. And this event is going to be major. There's not one department in this entire organization that's not involved in a service work order. It is literally touches everyone. That's the projects. Any questions on any of the projects I went over or any? Go ahead.
Yeah, I actually want to back up.
Sure.
I should have said before. The metrics and dashboard, so on line loss, is there any way to include the rest of the year on that? Because there's some seasonality there, obviously. I'd like to see the 12 months in totality, not just January through August.
Yes, to answer
Can
your
you do
question.
like a rolling 12 months?
Yeah.
Because there's obviously some seasonal tendency
Seasonality of
there.
it. Yep, yeah, I could. That's a good point. We're also looking at, and again, this isn't going to be till next year, and I don't know the timing on this, but we are looking at trying to separate some of our SCADA data and trying to use that data to better pinpoint our line losses. That's one thing that we kind of struggle with now is you're basically looking at what we've billed compared to, what we bought from Hoosier, and it's at a grand level, right? So it's hard to pinpoint exactly where the problems are. And so we have some of that data. It's messy. We're trying, that's one thing that Chris has been working on. Again, it's on our backlog. We're not working it now. But to answer your question, yes.
Yeah, I guess what I'm really trying to get at sort of is a long-range snapshot of what line loss looks like since the reclaim started.
Mhm.
Like we always talk about tree trimming and how much money and how much value members going to get from that. But yet there doesn't seem to be any way to quantify that.
Yep.
You know what I mean?
Yep.
I'm just interested in seeing if there's a correlation.
Yep. Line loss is going to be a tough one to correlate to tree trimming. And the only reason is because there's so many variables in line loss. I'm not saying it can't be done and there's not a correlation, but it's going to be tough. Unless you can get it
Let's
down to
just
speed.
do the rolling 12 for now.
Yep, I agree. Yep, I can do that. Any other questions on projects?
Can I ask Chris one? I'm really backing up here. In your project, and we talked about your itemized, we didn't talk about a cold air return. And it was listed, and I'm not familiar with what that is.
So basically, if we build a wall to block that off, there is no cold air return in the back.
So that's not a facility upgrade that needs to be done, that's just specific to that project.
Correct.
We'll want to make sure when we itemize it that gets lumped in with the wall. Any other questions on projects? Metrics? Carrie, you're up then. Now for the funner stuff, right?
Numbers. I'm going to sneak over there as long as everybody's okay with it so I can see what you're saying too. So tonight I thought we would run through some of the suggestions that we're making as far as how we might look at the financials as far as like the report out at the monthly board meetings. The first thing I want to make sure we're on the same page with is the detailed financials that we're giving you all today. Those aren't going away. Those will still be delivered to you all. What we're thinking is put them in as for your information section type of thing, and obviously we can answer any questions that you have at the board meeting on those specific lines and within those areas. And as we're going through these questions, comments, concerns, feedback, good, bad, things you want added, that sort of thing, this is good conversation, I hope, as far as things we could do to potentially make this better for us to deliver the financial information that you all want to see. So I sat in, first thing I wanted to do was take the main financial statements, the balance sheets, the cash flow, the income statement, statement of operations, and the cash flow, and rolled it up to some degree. So it worked out perfect because I sat in with some of the directors here on the CCD, is that the financial class that you all go through. And some of the things that they talked about in there were right down the path where I was wanting to go with some of these financial statements. So I took them pretty much from that class, and I think will play in nicely when you guys are sitting through those financial classes from your director of education, because it all kind of plays together. So the first one's the balance sheet. So first on these, what I thought I would do is kind of talk through the format of it, and then we'll sort of walk through the numbers of it. So this rolls up the balance sheet. These are the lines that the subtotals essentially of the categories from the expanded balance sheet that you're used to seeing. Same periods are being covered. We've got the prior year on August of 2019, then August of 2020, and then the previous month of July 20. And showing the difference in between months, the dollar and the percentage, that's between August and July, so between the 2 months, how much change do we have? So I like this because it's summarized on one page as opposed to have to flipping back and forth between the assets and the liabilities section. So thing that stands out to me on the balance sheet side of things is pretty flat, $41,000 on $56 million on the asset side, so 0.1% change. As far as over here, these variances, kind of at a starting point, I was trying to think of to standardize to some degree. What do I comment on? Obviously, you can ask questions during the board meeting and we can explain it. But as far as like trying to standardize what gets a letter over here that gets a comment down here, it's kind of a starting point. This is what I'm thinking for right now. So as you flow down through here, the only thing that hits that in this particular month is total current and accrued liabilities. We had a $274,000 decrease in that area, is about 6.1%. And the majority of that, there's a lot of accounts, remember, that roll up into that, but the biggest change between months in that area that caused this was, as that comment says right there, the physical checks that got written in the month of August that were part of the $498,000 annual retirement that we did. It was about $320,000. So from a balance sheet perspective, again, not much change in the current month. When we move to the next one, Brett. So statement of operations, key lines, again, this major categories that you're used to seeing on the full statement of operations. Categories that are being shown, and it's showing the prior year, year to date, the current month, what was actual and what was budget, and then for year to date, actual and budget, and then again showing dollar and percent differences between the year to date, actual and budget. Using the same sort of methodology as far as like which things have comments on them in the current month. For this month, sitting up in here, we've got changes. We're pretty far under in both of these categories, but as we talked about in previous months, where it's mainly because of March, April, and May, and we were significantly under in the kilowatt hours purchased in that area, so the expense and the revenues under. Controllable expenses, current month, we're about 100,000 under. Year to date, we're about 342. That's been a recurring theme, right, for the last several times we've talked about this. A lot of it's related to COVID. One comment I want to make too about this is, I'm going to go into a little detail when we're in here. Certainly, again, feel free to ask questions, but the next slide deck that we go through is a blown out dashboard of this income statement that walks through a lot more detail as far as what some of the variances are. Again, so significantly under in the controllable expenses area, and we'll key in more in that in the next slide deck. Fixed expenses, pretty flat in the month, pretty flat in the year to date. These terms over here, patronage capital and operating margins, that's lining it up with how that NRECA class for directors is. That's a term from Form 7. That essentially means operating margins, as it says at the end. So that's the term that would be in the full version of the statement of operations. So we were about 90,000 better than budget on the operating margins in the month. We're sitting at just over $1 million in operating margins year to date, about 390 head of the budget. Non-operating, there's a comment down here that explains what that is. Most of that is hometown, Viasat, and then the patronage capital, Hoosier Energy being the main one that typically comes towards the end of the year. So overall, we're sitting at about 1.1 million in total margins against a budget of 740,000. Can't read that. 380 better than budget. Move on to the next one. So this one, again, was in that class, the director class. This doesn't look quite like the statement of cash flows. The GAAP statement of cash flows breaks things out in specific sections: operating activities, investing activities, and financing activities. The way that it has to get presented as far as a set of audited financial statements. So their idea was do we really care about if it's operating, investing, or financing? This thing should be more about what's the cash that came in the door and the cash that went out the door in whatever period that you're looking at. So this top section, the numbers as far as beginning balance and ending balance are the exact same that would show up on the full cash flow statement that we have today. It's just looking at it in a different format essentially. So same periods we've used in the past. So we started using recently, adding in the prior year and then the current month and the year to date. So basically you have whatever the cash balance was at the beginning of each of these periods, how much cash came in, literally came in the bank account, how much cash went out in the month, and then down below you have the exploded version of, I color coded it like this 23 million here, you're used to that 23 million, so you can see where the cash is coming from and in somewhat rolled up categories. What I like about this is this year to date section over here and the year-to-date percentage of total so that we can see the cash that came in the door, where did it come from, like on a percentage basis, and the dollars. And then on the cash dispersed, the cash going out the door, where did it, how does it rank as far as dollars going out the door for the period that we're looking at. So specifically, we're sitting at about $2.4 million in cash at the end of the month of August. In the cash received section, most all that's coming from cash received from members. So bills going out the door and then members paying their bills. $3.2 million for the month, 22.6 for the year. It's almost 97% of the cash that's coming in the door this year. On the cash dispersed going out, this isn't something that's called out in actual cash flows that we've used in the past, but it was in that CCD education class, and I thought it was a nice piece of information to add, is the purchase wholesale power, so what we pay Hoosier. So in the month of August, it was 2.4, just over 16 million for the year, 71.5% of the total. Expenses to operate the departments and facilities, so that's the daily operations of Decatur County REMC. What's that cost? Salaries, everything that we take on a daily basis to operate the REMC. It was about $300,000 for the month. It's about $3.9 million for the year, 17.5%. Utility plant investment, that's how much money have we spent on the plant in the year. 213 for the month, 770 for the year. It's about 3.4% of the total dollars. The next two are related to debt, principal and the interest components, 323, 461 respectively. About 4% of the total cash that went out the door has been to pay our debt obligations. And then last, we have capital credit retirements that we have 816,000. That's the year-to-date amount that we've paid between the two retirements. This 322 is the number of the current month related to the physical checks that went out the door as part of the 498,000. I had a bit of in this particular line. There are some classifications that I had to move around in order to appropriately report the cash as far as classification. I guess I'd say within categories, because when you look at these dollars, we're still at 816, and that's the full cash that went out the door as far as capital credits as of the end of August. These numbers, as far as, I'm bouncing around here, but I'm trying to explain as best I can, since it being new to you all. This $2.3 million is, that number doesn't change based upon any cash at the beginning of the month. Let's start that way. Cash at the beginning of the month, it's the cash balance in our books at whatever the last day of the last month was, right? This $2.39 million, that's whatever the cash balance was in our books. Think of it like your checkbook at home at the end of the month. Everything else in this area is classification of the ins and the outs of how things change between our balance sheet to classify the cash, essentially. So, and that's probably getting way in the weeds of things, but I wanted to point that out as far as the amount of capital credit retirements of what we show in the current month, not being the 498,000, because there's a timing issue of when the bill credits happen versus when the actual physical checks went out the door. Does that make sense or no? Further, is there some, I'm trying to think of how else to potentially explain it, or we could think of, or if you think about specific questions, maybe we can touch on those towards the end if there's specific questions about it. So that's the overall financial statements and sort of a high-level review of them. Get to the top, if you would. So on the statement of operations, so this is more of the exploded version of the statement of operations. So it starts with gross margin. It's the top section of our statement of operations. So this is a picture of gross margins made up of our sales of electricity minus how much the electricity costs us, right, from Hoosier. So basically, I'm trying to show a picture of the gross margin, what it looks like on, some of these graphs came straight from the metrics that Brett had tracked, but I wanted to try to get them on one page to represent the whole picture as far as gross margin. So you see how we stay in the black line on all these graphs as we go through here is the 5-year average. The green bar is the actuals for the year, and the blue is the budget for the year. So on the sales of electricity, you can see how we're flowing against the 5-year average and against our budget, and same with the power costs. And you can see us being under in these in April-May timeframe, both in the sales and in the power cost, basically because of the volumes being down related to COVID. Gross margin, so when you take the sales minus the power cost, you get the gross margin. So that's how we're standing against on a monthly basis against the 5-year average and against the budget. And you're going to see in these slides that have a lot of these cumulative graphs. So that basically stacks month after month on top of each other. The blue lines are going to be the budget. The green lines are going to be the actual. You can barely see the green line. You can catch a little bit of it right there because we're so close on the gross margin against the budget on a year-to-date basis. They're almost on top of each other. So I guess the message on this slide is for year-to-date, we're spot on. I think it's $19,000 is the difference where we are against budget on the gross margin side of things. Move on to the next one. So this is within the gross margin, the kilowatt hours sold, and the sales that we had, a little bit further breakdown. Most of this information, so in the past we had that 3 or 4 page Word document that talked through had some tables in the beginning, and then it went through the individual departments and gave variance explanations. The first couple pages of that document are kind of sitting here in graphical form now. So for a way to read this first one, kilowatt hours sold by class. So it's a stacked graph. So I need to change the color of this. I can tell now because I can't see it very well here. I think hopefully you can see it better on your iPad. So the kilowatt hours sold, I can't make out exactly what that one says, 76 million in residential. There was 20 million in commercial, 63 million in industry without IPT, and then IPT there was 63 million for a total year-to-date amount of about 220 million kilowatt hours sold. Then we've got the budget side of things, and you can see how the numbers show up there. It's about 250 million of budgeted kilowatt hours. Graph over here shows the percent variances within these categories. I think it's important to kind of understand how far under budget where you were. Now, you hope in normal years you might get over here some potentially, but with the way things are going this year, pretty much every category is in a negative position. The colors line up as you go across. There's not agreement over here. I wanted to throw on the total for the whole REMC. We're just slightly over 10% under in the kilowatt hours that we've sold, and you can see the categories down going down through there. Closest one is residential, which is kind of what we've talked through in the past. These two down here are basically breaking up. I wanted to show the composition of our revenue by the major categories that we look at. Pretty close from a percentage standpoint to where we budgeted. So budget's over here, actuals over here. IPT and residential are up 1%. Commercial and industry minus IPT are both down 1%. So pretty in line with as far as the percent of total where we'd expect that to be. This one over here is, to me, what all these kind of accumulate to. Gross margin by class. So of the gross margin that we have, 19,000. We have 19,000 more than budget right now. We're sitting at about 6.3 something million dollars of total margin. Again, it's a stacked graph, so it shows 5.3 million of it comes from the wholesale area. There's 600,000 from the industry minus IPT, and then 475 from IPT. So when you look at those, that one's slightly under budget. This one's slightly under budget. This one's slightly over budget. Why these are holding so close to budget or being over budget is because most of the margin that we get on them is from demand. And demand in most of these months didn't fluctuate much from then. And the month that it did, April, right, Brett? I think it was April was when all the ratchets kicked in, which basically raised their kilowatts much higher to get to the ratchet level that's agreed to in their contract. So that's how those hung in. Both of them are actually in negative positions on their tracker right now too. So that means those margins are probably going to be decreasing over the remaining months of the year because of being in a negative position on the tracker. So the next section, as you go down the statement of operations, is the controllable expenses. So this is just at a high level, the 5 different departments that we track from controllable expenses. Things that catch my eye first on here is that maintenance and at A&G are by far the most spend in those categories. Operations falls right behind that. Then billing and then corporate relations is the lowest spend that we have on a department basis. Green is cumulative year-to-date actual, and then the blue is budget. So we're about 100,000 behind in operations, pretty close in maintenance. Billing's about right on. We're under about 50 in corporate relations, and a lot of that's because of the canceled events and things that are happening in that area, unfortunately. In A&G, we have some variances in that one from about 150,000 to the under budget in that area. Controllable expenses, cumulative, this is again stacking actual month after month for all of these combined. Black is 5-year average, blue's the budget, green's the actual. So 5-year average, we expect the budget to be higher than that just because cost of inflation, cost of living increases, et cetera, is going to make your actual be higher to some degree. And right in the beginning stages, we got our actual running about right on the budget line, and then we see this decrease over the last 3 months. Those last 3 months from May, if you think back through the months, that's when we started having pretty significant, our actual was pretty significantly under our budget for the last 3 months, causing us to get to this gap that we have right here. So these, I thought I would go through one as an example, but probably on a monthly basis, I was thinking probably that would be more of a read-only type of thing. So all 5 departments have a sheet just like this. Operations is first up, so we'll look at that one. Actuals green, blue's the budget of where we thought we would be. So some are over, some are under, right? So this cumulative graph shows you some are over, some are under. So where do we stand right now type of thing. To try to understand how we're holding against our budget. So we're a little bit under there, we caught up to it, then we went under for the last 3 months. And then I have a section like this on for all of them. It talks about the current months, some comments on that, and kind of an overall year-to-date comment and outlook for, excuse me, just comments, I guess, at a high level on an outlook and a year-to-date basis for them. And go on through to the maintenance. Everybody's got the same type of graph, so I don't think we need to go through all of them individually. I mean, if there's specific questions, we certainly can address them. So then, what's all that boil down to at the end on our statement of operations, right, to the margins. So we have operating margins, the day-to-day operation of the REMC. We've got the non-operating margins, which are the hometown, all the patronage capital that we get, the bias-at, those sort of things. So then those combine together to get our total margins. So in my eyes, operations is the main one to focus. That's why it's biggest and about half the page at the top. Again, you can see the 5-year average, the budget line, and then the actual. Got some gnats flying around. Over the last 3 months, we see this actual line shooting up. That pretty much correlates exactly to us being under in controllable expenses. It's almost the same amount of money that we're sitting under our budget. We're 600,000 under, we're at 600,000 cumulative against $1 million, and our 340,000 under in the controllable expenses from a budget perspective. Down here in the non-operating section, holding pretty steady with it. That bump right there is when we get record the payment of the hometown equity distribution that we get. And then this last huge bump that you see is when we reckon it's the budgeted amount for the patronage allocation from Hoosier. In combined total margins, we're at about 1.1 million, sitting with that gap that we talked, $400,000 gap that we talked about up there. That's the last slide in there. We hit the plant investment. Brett spoke some about this already. So I added a graph to this. The second page of it is the same page that you guys have seen in the past. Again, I'm more a visual person. To me, a picture kind of tells a story better a lot of times than looking at numbers on a page. So basically, budget line, actual, and when it turns orangish color, that's what we're projecting for the rest of the year. So comment's hard to read, but it says January to August, we're 1.6 million behind the original budget, and we're projecting to be 1.7 behind at the end of the year. So basically, obviously, if we're losing $100,000 more in that we're going to stay pretty close to what we expect at this point. This down here breaks apart the investment between the distribution plant and then general buying trucks, IT security, different things of that nature that aren't related to the distribution plant. Green is actual, orangish color is expected, what we think we're going to get to by the end of the year, and then blue is what was originally budgeted. So you can see we're planning to spend. Brett was speaking about that project, I think, a little bit ago, about $300,000-ish in the distribution plant. Another big one that doesn't have much green to it, this is New River getting that pole catch-up done by the end of the year. Is the difference between that green and that orange category. This is purchasing of a truck, I think, and a trailer in the next few months. There's still plans to happen, so no actual yet, but expecting to hit the target by the end of the year. As he said, we're spending a lot of time. We have a war room. This is the war room during the week. Really trying to hold the accountability there, trying to figure out what projects we're going to work on, and getting timelines in place to make sure we can at least hit this target that we're trying to do for the rest of the year, plus plan into the next year. That's I guess all the stuff I was wanting to go through. It's a lot of information, probably real fast, but I'm curious if you guys, what you think. Do you like it? Would you like to see something different?
Can we continue to get the financial report?
The Word document?
Yes, please.
Okay. Just the same format that it was in before? Okay. Yeah, if that's what you guys want, we certainly can do that.
Then the other item I've got, if you go to the very bottom page of the plan investments.
That one?
Yeah, under vehicles, year to date, didn't we purchase a meter truck in like April for $38,000? Or at least that's when it was budgeted.
No, that one hadn't come in. There's a meter truck and then the digger derrick.
Right, we bought the meter truck though, didn't we? It's already been purchased.
I don't think so. You're talking about Brian Keys.
Okay,
Yeah, no, it has not come in.
okay, maybe it wasn't the meter tech, maybe.
All
Was
I
it
know
meter
is that-
tech or was it the staking
I'd
tech?
have to go back. I think it's.
I'm pretty sure it's a meter truck and I'm pretty sure we've already paid for it.
Chris's we paid for last year.
Was that last year?
Yeah.
Okay, I stand corrected. And I thought-
And the only reason I remember that is Pat said something the other day. He had quotes before this whole COVID stuff, and then he's getting renewed quotes. So I know there is a pickup truck, and then this, we were supposed to have the digger derrick here last week. Now they're saying this one, or next week. That makes up the 323.
Okay.
I'll go back and confirm those.
Okay.
Anybody else have anything else for Eric?
I've got one other topic, and we talked about last year if we were having significant cash flow, how do we return it to the members so we don't get hit with large margins at the end of the year? And we bounced things around last year that wouldn't work. Would a bill credit work if we gave each member a bill credit?
Would it reduce our margin?
Oh, is it legal to do to reduce our margin? Yes.
Is it legal? Yeah, I thought.
Yeah. it would
And if we
definitely-
did it by members, not meters, then it can be equal across the table.
Yeah, sure.
Because each member is equal.
You can definitely give a bill credit, for sure. I think it was something that we kind of,
Because our cash flow year to date, we're up $800,000 year to date. And by the end of the year with the cash flow that we had over the previous year, we're looking at very substantial margins. And I'd like to be talking about that instead of waiting until the end of November like we did last year.
If you remember, I brought this up last fall.
I know.
It has to be done like now.
So then
You have to
that's,
have 2 months to get it out, because if their bill isn't as much as the credit, you don't want to overlap years.
I definitely
Don't
wanted
you
to.
have the LE on there where you expect to end up? I mean, we just went through that, right? For margin.
LE's not on there.
Well, I shouldn't, I guess.
But that's where I was going by cash flow. When you compare, because last year we borrowed money, we didn't borrow money this year. We've already paid out capital credits. So we're right at $800,000 ahead on cash flow. So I mean, you could technically give $120 per member and still be almost where we were last year.
My question on that is, no problem giving money back to members. What is the projected work plan for next year? Do we have a projected work plan for next year on that? And if you don't know, that's okay.
I don't have the number off the top of my head, but the original number, it's in there, it's above 2 million. We know we're gonna have quite a bit of spend, especially because everything we're basically up in cash because number one, the controllable expenses were 340,000 above the plan because of COVID. And then the other part of it is we're 1.6 million behind on what we expected to spend this year in
Yeah,
construction.
and I'm good with all of that, but we talked about it last year and it got pushed off to the last minute, and I just want to get it on the table now.
Well, the reason I brought that up though is, if we give the bill credit, are we going to be willing to borrow next year to get that paid for, that work plan paid for? That's why I'm bringing that up.
You'll have to. It's basically the amount that we are behind today. So if we would have done the 1.6 construction work plan projects, if we could have got those done this year and then put on top of next year's plan, you're not gonna have the cash.
Well, that's why I had sent the email I did about 3 weeks ago to get a projected cash flow so we could talk about it.
Yep, and we're working on that.
I'm working on updating the 10-year forecast and with the war room, with the plant investment, trying to figure out what the capital spend is going to be.
The plant investment's the biggest piece, right? So we're trying to get,
Yeah, but
not,
if you go off of the work plan, you already have a number of what it should be.
well, I mean,
It is, that
yeah.
was the whole idea of having the work plan, was to map out how much money we would need. So we should be able to plan this out 3 years.
We can, but it's not by project. So in other words, if we want to know
But it was, in your work plan, it is by project. It's by,
Fuse coordination is one, and then you have
yeah, but
AJCSR. So none of that, alls they are is a snapshot of here's what we think the projects for AJCR. We can estimate it, and that's what we're going to end up doing to create the cash flow, because we do need a 10-year forecast with this cash flow.
well, but I would like to make it a priority just for year end. There's no need to end the year with 1.5 or 1.8 million in margins, in my opinion. Because that's just money we have to charge 30 years from now to pay back.
But then we're gonna have to, that's fine, as long as we're okay pulling in the, because we were gonna, if all this COVID wouldn't have hit, we'd have been at budget, and we would have got the 1.6, we would have had to have borrowed before November. So that, I'm good with that, I like giving back the money, but you just gotta remember, you're gonna pull up the date to borrow.
So Eric, can you confirm that it's 800,000 to deposit for cash, number one? Do you agree with that
I want to
statement?
see, like, where are you, how are you getting?
I got that from the money we didn't borrow this year compared to last, which was 480,000. And we've already paid out 322,000 in capital credits this month that we hadn't paid out. So that's how I'm coming up with the 800,000.
Say the first part again. You didn't borrow?
We didn't borrow this year,
Right.
where we borrowed last year.
Right.
And that, when it comes to the bottom line on cash flow, that's the number I was looking at. Because if you look at last year to this year, net increase in cash, you're looking at 945,000 compared to 936,000 this year. And those two numbers is what's making me think it's going to be substantial.
You know, our cash year to date, yes, it's not, it's at the bottom. Get, told the full cash flow up. Now go to the
Sorry.
bank manager reports.
I just want to make sure that.
The
Manager reports.
I know the numbers that I'm looking
The
at.
CF or top second. Oh, what's that? Oh. It's gonna be a little low up here. So we're 936,000
Correct.
ahead in cash of where we started the year for the $2.3 million, 2.38, whatever that is.
But we've already paid out 322,000 in capital credits.
We've effectively paid out 816,000 this
Yeah,
year.
but I'm only looking at the 322 because we got 317 from Hoosier. Didn't we get that from Hoosier? We paid 275, but we paid out 317 last month. So I didn't add that in because I looked at that as it came from Hoosier.
The money they gave us is a net to nothing.
But that's in that number.
It's in the 800,000.
Yeah.
That's why I didn't use that 800,000 for capital credits or the 816.
Yeah, but it's in this nine, I can't hardly read it
It's
there.
not,
Sorry.
well, there's a positive and a
There you
negative
go.
in here, because we got 275, but then we paid out 317. So whatever that nets out to is the net cash outflow.
Okay.
So it's netted together, so there's not 275 sitting in. It is in there, but then there's a negative for the 317
Right.
that we paid out.
That's why I didn't use the whole total. But that's where I'd like to make it a priority if we could, to figure out what our cash flow is, so we're not scrambling in December.
We're definitely working it.
It's my main.
It's been his main priority. We're working it. But the reason you got a lot of cash right now is because we're 1.6 behind. We're gonna do those projects next year. So
Had we met that budget on planned investment, we would have 1.7 less million in cash sitting in our bank right now against the 2.3 that's sitting there. So
and then 340 on control.
well, if you assume that's happened and
Yeah, true.
not control that really, so.
So you're 340 on the controllables right now, and your projection was to maintain that through year end?
I think we're gonna gain back spend a little bit of that because of like the event at the end of October that expense had already happened, but
It was close.
I thought you
to
said
that
300,
300
right?
range.
Right, it was
Yeah.
300 is what
Yeah.
it was.
right.
Materially, it's gonna be about
A lot, yeah, it's gonna be about
It's gonna be a lot.
100,000, yeah. And again, you
which
know,
is a good problem to have.
So tree trimming is completely expensible in the year in which it occurs?
There is some mowing. I did not pull the numbers, but it's close to probably 40. And I should have brought that in here. I can actually probably send it out, but I've worked with the guys the last 3 days to create so we've been focused on trying to do this reclaim, get the reclaim done, and we're to the point now where we gotta start getting in the maintenance cycle, or the stuff that we did back in 2016, it's already grown up 4 or 5 feet, right? So we're doing some of that this year mowing, but we're not gonna be able to do everything that we wanted to do within the budget to get on the cycle that we think we need. So I think there's originally it was 67,000, but I think what we figured out is we would want to push some of that off anyway. But to get into a cycle where every 5 years, because the idea is once we get through this reclaim, you're going to be on a cycle where we come in, we side trim, We mow, the next year we spray, you skip 5 years, you come back in, you side cut, you mow, you spray, and you get, it's every 5 years for every circuit. And we've got it spread out apart, you know, roughly 300 miles a year to do that. In order to get into that maintenance cycle, we really should, and I don't have the exact number here today. I was planning on getting it all together and sending it out in an email. But I think it's probably going to be roughly 40,000 that I can get the mowing done this year. We haven't bid it but one place, so I need to bid it a couple different places. But that would get us into a nice rotation of what we want to get into, if that makes any sense. I'd show you the spreadsheet, but it's ugly right now. We're still kind of working on it.
But as Jason's question, can we, that's the mowing, can we speed up the trimming actually any?
We can, I'm sure we can.
Does that make
call
sense
Tom
to
and
do?
say we want two more, yeah.
Okay, so that would be another possible option then.
But just remember, we're going into, I mean, I'd really like to get this information. I mean, I agree with Jeff 100%. I'd really like to know, because if what we're going to end up doing is spending a bunch of money to reduce them, so we don't have to pay back in 30 years, but then we're going to have to go borrow it for 30 years next year once we start in the construction work plan, it makes no sense. So that's, yes, to answer your question, we could go pull the trigger on tree trimming. We could go do this mowing.
It's the same thing. Are you gonna borrow it from the members, or are you gonna borrow it from?
Yeah,
the
where do you want to look at it?
It's the same question. Just how do you wanna juggle it to get there? You wanna use their money, or you wanna use the bank's money at 1.2% or whatever? I don't know the answer to that.
I like the 1.2%.
So it is high priority. That's one of the reasons we have this war room, is because I want to know the specific projects, right? We can't come in here and say, this is an estimate of aged ACSR, and, you know, we're going to try to spend this much. That's what we did last year. That's why we're behind right now, in my opinion. That's one of the reasons. So he's nailing out, like, here's the feeders we're going to do, because the project spend is all in one category that says aged ACSR, that was based upon the original construction work plan that said we got a lot of old conductor out there. Great example is the A2 over by Carl. Those are the projects that we have to identify. We've got them pretty much identified, but we got to go get them costed, and we got to go out and get bids out for them so that we have good, accurate numbers on what this is going to look like. So 2021 is not going to, we're close, we'll be there soon. 2022 and 23, we're just going to try to estimate what we think the cost of the projects are. We know what the projects are. We do have some cost estimates from the original construction work plan, but I want to know by detail exactly what those projects look like. So,
Other questions while we're on this topic?
but I think that'll help us understand, because I'm all for doing you know, if we're not going to have, you know, if you don't have to go borrow the money, if you're not just pulling that forward, well then of course, but a lot of times to me, where it fits in, let's give it back, is like when we get it from Hoosier, or it's not in rate base. You know, if we're doing something that's not in rate base, then not rate base, but in the actual rates built in, then that's a perfect opportunity to give it back. But if all we're doing is, you know, the reason we have a lot of cash is because, number one, COVID is about 340 of it, and then the 1.6 is timing. And it's quite interesting, because a lot of those co-ops were really thinking that we were going to be hurting on margins this year because of COVID, and then come to find out, I don't think everybody expected our expenses to be as far as they are. So we are working on cash flow. We'll get that as soon as possible. And if we get something drafted up and it's before next month, and we think that it's very appropriate to do we'll get you guys we'll get you the information, and if we have to react prior to the next board meeting, we'll try to. Anything else?
Any other questions? Then we're going.
I skipped a section real quick. This shouldn't really take that long. If you don't mind, take one pass around. So when I talked about the strategic planning and the stuff that we're doing that's coming up, I think kind of our recommendation and what we talked about last board meeting was that we thought the board should be involved for sure when we talk about industry trends and disruptions. So we're starting, these are our partners, right? These are, our partners are coming in to do a presentation on what their expertise is. So you can see here, we've got them listed here: CFC, IEC, Hoosier Energy, NRECA, legal counsel, and then a rate consultant. Actually, there's 2 rate consultants. We have some of these planned in October. So Hoosiers is the 23rd and CFC's is the 26th. I have yet to get the IEC, NRECA, legal counsel, and rate consultants on the calendar. Our recommendation from myself and my staff is that we thought it would be appropriate to have a board, you guys divvy these up, and we would have a board representative at each one of these. They are going to be virtual, so I don't know that you necessarily need to be in the building. But we thought it was important because all this is going to be an input into our strategic planning offsite next year. And so we thought as a recommendation, you'd kind of split them up. I think the only ones we really care about right now are the CFC and the Hoosier Energy because those are coming up. So I don't know if you want to discuss or if there's folks that, you know, I was thinking at least having one board member participate in every one of these.
Is there a cost per person that they charge people?
No. So none of the only one that's going to be at cost is the rate consultant and legal. And I'm waiting on the quotes, but that won't be by person anyway. So no. These are specific. These aren't really training events, right? These are them coming in, virtually presenting to us what they see the future brings in these different, and again, the topics are kind of on here. Did I answer your question?
So that's being said, let's say open it up to whoever wants to come, not just limit to one.
That's fine. We just thought that it would be a minimum.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, if y'all want to come, that'd be great. I just didn't know if you really wanted to have to free up for this many times. I think as long as you at least have a minimum of one person there, you're right. That would be great
If my schedule permits, I'll do 3 of them, A, C, and D.
ACB.
I'm like Brian, though, I'd like to see as many people that could come.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah. I don't think I can do C. I might be able to make A.
So the main ones I'm worried about is A and C. So Jeff's going to cover A and C, and then does anybody else want to be in A and C?
I'd be interested in C. I have to double check my other calendar, but A is a possibility for me. So,
Is or isn't?
is a possibility.
Okay.
When do you need to know?
Before October 23rd and October 26th. It sounds like Jeff's going to have.
So we can just show up right before you're supposed to be there.
All I wanted to make sure is we had one representative from the board. So it sounded like Jeff's going to go to 2. So honestly, I think at this point, I'll just send invites out if you guys want to come to
That'd be great.
As long as we have one person there,
Yeah.
Or send a link to if it's virtual.
I'll put the link in the, yep. And just to give you a flavor, what we'll be doing is everyone in the room, my staff will have little notepads, and what we'll basically be doing is as we hear something that is a opportunity or threat or a trend, we'll write those concepts and themes down, and at the end of the meeting, we'll throw them all up on the wall. We'll try to categorize those things, and then we'll write a report out. So you will all see the report out for all of these. So don't feel bad if you can't participate in all of them, because you'll see a report out. But then all those report outs will be gathered together to create one big, like, here's the common themes that we saw, which is gonna go into our strategic planning and vision. So it is a big deal. That's kind of, as we create the vision statement, it's kind of important to have this information, so. Fair enough?
And then we actually just moving on to policy review then before we get to.
Yep. This is 1A, right? So we had an action, or there was an action from the board meeting minutes 2 months ago when we talked, right? You guys got the data for the director compensation. We just, basically, you guys should discuss it, and if there's any changes that we make. Obviously, we're not. We were in line. If you look at our director compensation, I mean, we're in line. We're less than average on a total. Ours is tilted a little different than everyone else's. The retainer's a little bit more, but then the participation in per diem is on other ones is less. So I sent that out in an email, so you'll have it. But we had an open action from the board meeting 2 months ago. So that's why it's on here.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah.
Is 3C correct? Is the CEO general manager that authorizes, or isn't that the chairman of the board? I thought for our discussion, it was the
3C.
chairman on 3C, the CEO general manager shall be authorized to reimburse directors for stipend expense. From my understanding, I thought that was the chairman of the board was authorized. Steve, do you remember that discussion? I think you and I had that.
Vaguely. But I think basically what it's saying there, though, he's authorized, maybe I just interpreted it a different way. Authorized to reimburse based upon the chairman. Are you referring to that in another policy, Suzanne? Or was it in this one?
I was just curious whether the CEO general manager would be authorized to reimburse the directors versus the chairman of the board. I would think he would be the one in the authority to do that.
But see, the way I interpret the way that's written, says authorized, it's the process of distributing the funds, it's not the approval. That's the way I interpret it, Suzanne, is that in previously Steve and Michael now is the one that is approving it, authorizing he as the CEO or general manager to distribute the funds. That's how I interpret it.
The chairman of the board is the one to authorize the payment.
Approve.
The CEO is the one to authorize
To
the actual
actually,
distribution.
that actually disperses the funds. So when I read the word authorized, it's authorized by the chairman of the board.
Yeah, I'm all for changing that.
I don't know.
Or you want to make a motion?
Do you want to change that or look at it more for bring it up for red line next meeting so we have some time to think about it?
I think it should have the chairman of the board
Okay.
shall authorize the CEO general manager to reimburse.
Yes.
I mean, I think something simple as that. The chairman of the board
Okay.
shall authorize the CEO general manager to reimburse the directors for the
Okay.
stipend. I think that should be the authority of the chairman of the board,
Okay.
regardless of this year, 10 years.
Shall be authorized by.
And I think that's how you were reading it anyways, just without that word.
That's how
That's
I'm
the
interpreting
wording.
it.
That's how I was interpreting it. I
Okay.
think the wording is probably a prudent change to make.
Just something simple as that.
Because of the way it's written right now, it kind of exempts the chairman of the board on the surface without interpretation from being involved in that process. That obviously is not the case. Or maybe you should just say be authorized by the chairman of the board.
Shall be authorized, there you go. Either way, the beginning or
Shall
the
be
end, I just think the
authorized by the
chairman of the board should be in
chairman of the
3C.
Or directed by the chairman of the board.
So you
Something
shall be
about-
authorized by the chairman of the board to reimburse. Just add by the chairman of the board.
That's what.
Yeah,
that's
that's
what
fine.
Yeah, CEO the chairman of the board to reimburse directors. So
Anything else on the policy that people are seeing to change?
That was my only,
Okay.
Let's take red line and bring it back.
To have an official red line, can you guys do?
can,
Or
but
do you guys have,
Prove it.
I'm
Red
fine
line
with just
and bring
approving
back
it.
to us next month.
You don't want to just approve that change? Huh?
Well, that's not normally how we do it.
True. Okay, yeah, you're right. So we're gonna ask you guys to redline that, and bring it back next month.
Got it.
I'm okay with that, so. The educational article, just on all kinds of things, COVID effects. Any questions or comments on that, or comments on it more than anything? Okay. So, Brett, your report out, then we move on. On the,
Basically, you guys got the report
Okay.
out, we had the meeting. Obviously, we're gonna probably have to re-engage. We originally talked about what the number needs to be. We thought the sweet spot was right around 10 to 12 people. We thought if we had survey and ballot pool 20, that we'd get that amount, we didn't. So we may have to have them basically pull some more names,
okay.
kind of what we're thinking.
Okay. Union negotiations. Directors, I asked people to think about if they would be willing to attend those last month. Did anybody,
are there any dates set?
Yes, November, there are 2, yes. Sorry. Later in November, I'll get to date. You can keep talking on.
okay. So what that is sitting in on the negotiations, so the board knows, so you can bring back to the board what it was, so we can verify and approve their things, so.
You need at least 2.
It would be
It's up to
nice to
you.
have 2. We don't have to put anybody on it. I think we should have 1 or 2 on it.
I'll be willing to do it just depending on the dates. That's what I asked.
Okay.
I'm willing to do it depending on the times, but if you're gonna do it during the day.
Okay, November 12th, it is during the day, so November 12th, 9 to 5.
What time is it, November 12th, what?
9 to 5.
9 to 5?
That is not.
I'm struggling to find the other one.
that's the first one, Brad?
I don't know.
Yeah, I participated before, and I'd be willing to as well, and if it does, I'll have to look at the schedule, but there's,
November 10th, 9 to 5, so it's the same week. It's Tuesday, November 10th, and then Thursday, November 12th. Those are the 2 now presented. You never know how many.
There's a possibility I could attend, but I don't know. I've got to do more research on those dates. But Dale, you said during the day you can't.
It's especially home days, just.
Right. Okay. Anybody else interested?
You have to know right now?
No. Okay. No, I don't have to know, right? We do.
I'll look into my schedule. I'm not for sure with being a holiday week in the middle there. I'm gonna try. I would be interested in participating if my schedule would work out.
Okay, that would be great.
I'll shoot you all the dates, so. the
Would it be a
dates-
full 9 to 5? Is it 2 full days pretty much?
I would hate to tell you no, it may not be, but I would schedule from 9 to 5, yes.
If my schedule works out, I would
Yeah.
participate.
Honestly, Suzanne, if you could make some of it, I would assume I could probably get you up to date if, there's a lot of sitting around deliberating and waiting.
While they're in there on the sidebar conversation.
I'll shoot you the dates.
So tentatively, I mean, say it's Suzanne and Steve.
If it works out.
If it works out, yeah, let us know for now. But
As long as you're good with not voting on it, I think you can decide.
Carl's maybe.
Okay.
Okay.
Suzanne Tiffany should be able to, if it's the way
Understand. Okay. So we've got 3 possibilities right now. Like I said, we'll go with that.
they do it here.
I think here,
Yes,
yes.
order.
Okay. At least it used to be.
Okay, then
And
we'll
I say 9 to 5, which just, I mean, you never know how these, I mean, we could be here till midnight, who knows?
Right.
I mean, it just, it shouldn't.
Then we're going to move on to the commercial tariffs. This was a change of language in the tariffs, changing moving from the power tracker to power cost adjustment, just terminology there, hopefully to better explain it. And then also changing from leading and lagging to only leading, correct?
No lagging.
Totally lagging because we've only been billing by lagging. So taking the leading out to make it less confusing.
As we see things like this where that's not how we bill, but if we want to bill that way in the future, we're going to leave it in there. Our, Crystal and I's opinion on that is let's do it how we bill it. And as these things come up and we see them, we're trying to get them changed. The power cost adjustment, that was really Crystal's recommendation, was that it's a little bit easier explainable. As we do the new bill print, that's what we want to use. So that's why we're changing it in all these documents.
Anybody have a problem with this change wording?
I don't have a problem with changing the wording, I still just have problems with the rates.
I understand. So, but the wording, you're okay with changing?
As long as I'm not approving the rate.
All we're doing is approving the wording. Change, the rates are already approved.
I'll make a motion to modify the changes.
Okay. Steve made a motion to modify.
Second.
Jason seconded it. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay. Wording has changed on all of those. Okay. CFC meeting delegate. Right, we need to, right now, the delegate is Jason. How are we voting this year? Isn't that what?
This one doesn't have to be done.
Okay.
It can be, if you guys want to write it down, we can, or we can just take roll call. It's not like our officers where it's called out to do it that way. So, I'll give a little context here. You're talking about the IEC, right? So,
CFC.
oh, the CFC, yeah, okay.
So that's
CFC can be voted by mail. You do not have to go to the meetings. Is Steve the current one now?
No, Jason is.
Jason.
So if you want a representative to go to the online meeting, you'll have to choose someone else. If you're fine with me voting by mail on your behalf, I'd be glad to still be the representative. But if you want representation online, you'll have to choose someone else.
We'll receive all the, what do you call it, the packet, you know, with all the.
So I'll make a motion for Jason to get it done.
I'll second.
Second. Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay. Then affiliated organizations. I forget, Brian, do you have any? Okay. Jason,
We did have a Hoosier board meeting earlier in the week. It was in person for the directors, the CEOs joined virtually. The main takeaway from that meeting is as we continue replacements for the generation portfolio for MIRM, there were 3 new contracts that were brought before the board. They're basically just resolutions to allow Hoosier to negotiate at a price not to exceed X dollar amount. I think they're outlined on your call to order. There were 3 of them that we did approve. One of them is the more traditional generation resources, which was kind of a point of contention. Our discussion, replacing fossil fuel generation with more fossil fuel. The others are geared more towards renewables, and we continue to see those prices low. So that's the push to try and get in negotiations and get some of these secured now while prices are low, but they change weekly. So if they don't get a deal done this week, they may get another proposal the following week. So it's a moving target, but most of these proposals, these resolutions that are presented and the board approves, a lot of them won't be executed. They're just, we're authorizing them to negotiate on our behalf. So that was the main gist of the meeting this week.
okay. Steve, did you have I see this one?
No.
Okay. Anything from our committees? Board Accountability Committee? Anything from the Broadband Committee?
We have a meeting scheduled for next Tuesday night to kind of go over Viasat stuff. We've got pricing and everything for Viasat, and then go over kind of where Watch is at on their work. So that's scheduled for next Tuesday.
I don't know of anybody that went to any training to report out on or conferences. I think there's any training this month that I know of. Okay, then added to it, we have IC annual meeting, delegate and IC director nomination. Okay, so our current director is Steve, and annual meeting delegate, that has to be someone else, correct? Besides you, correct? Or whoever is our, because we need to nominate a new director, or either renominate Steve or nominate a new director for IEC. So,
I'll nominate Steve for IC director. Is that?
I'll nominate Jeff Mills for IC director.
so, okay. Do you want to open or close voting? Probably, I forget how.
We can, do you go? I'll give you a piece of paper.
So. Yes, I think. Huh? Oh, are there any other nominations?
Yeah, you didn't close on
Can I close nominations on the 2? Okay, I'm going to close the nominations with Steve and Jeff. Yes.
Steve.
Okay, Steve will remain our director. Do we have anyone interested in being the annual meeting delegate?
Whether you were last year, weren't you? I think,
Right.
It's alternative on terms of
What does that all involve? I don't actually know. Right.
Well, last year it all went to the meeting, voting, but I don't know what will be this year.
So it's going to be a virtual meeting on December 7th at 10.
It's gonna be,
December 7th?
10 o'clock. It'll probably last hour to 2 hours.
I nominate Dale.
What day of the week is that?
December what?
7th.
maybe this is a.
It's,
It's a Monday.
it is virtual too, so you'd be able to call it.
If no one else can, I can probably make that work.
I nominate Michael.
Huh? Okay. I'll accept. Anybody else want it? Please? Okay, I'll take it. I think that's all we needed from IEC. Dale, do you have a report out from the?
Sure. Referenced it earlier tonight in the minutes from last month's meeting, the closing comments or the closing conversation at the end of last month's meeting regarding the meeting of the, I guess what I'm going to say is concerned members. Subsequent to that meeting, Kenny called me on a Saturday morning. We finally hooked up. It was actually Labor Day weekend. And he extended an invitation to me. Long story short, I accepted the invitation, and 2 nights ago I attended a meeting at Kenny's house. I must say that the buffet that they provided was the absolute best buffet I've ever been to. Kidding aside, but I was there, and Kenny, you can interject here. The one thing I've said to Kenny all along is that, from my perspective, the fact that only select members or a select member of the directors are invited to this meeting is by definition divisive to what we're trying to accomplish. My whole intent for going was to try to open up a line of communication. The other attendees who were in tonight's meeting were in attendance in that meeting Tuesday night. I thought it went very, very well. I had no major expectations other than to have a rational adult conversation about how we can begin to move forward and how we can get beyond where we're at right now, because, and again, these are my words, we're very divided. We've got to get beyond this. When I look at the time and the energy spent in different directions, if we could channel that and focus that, we would be much better ahead. But it was a very general conversation. I was very pleased with the outcome of it. I think it's all predicated, this is my perception, it's all predicated on the fact of one word, and that's mistrust. And I don't think that mistrust started under the current regime. There's historical information there, there's a lot of data there, and I don't know all of it, I can appreciate all of it, but I had suggested to Kenny that, I'd be willing to continue to meet to try to bridge this gap, but I would certainly hope that it would not be just a select director, that we could expand that to other directors. So, that's kind of it.
That is, I believe, the last official thing on the.
Can I ask a question? What is the ruling about how many directors may be together at one place?
That came up the other night, Kenny, and we briefly discussed it, I don't know.
There is, as far as I'm aware, there is nothing in our bylaws on directors being together at one place outside of meetings.
I thought
I believe there is.
Where is it?
I'm just, I was thinking, I don't know.
You think it's in our information?
I
Ted?
think it is. I need to go research it because I thought at some point there was a,
I do know I've gone through all the bylaws fairly recently, and I don't personally remember it, so if you can find it, please send it to me.
I'll look because I don't want to misspeak. I
So-
might.
Well, it was brought up, so
Yeah,
it's just
we
one of the
read it.
things we need to.
Okay. And like I said, from my recollection of going through the bylaws fairly recently, I don't remember anywhere in the bylaws where it stated anything about numbers of directors.
The reason I was thinking it was 5 was a quorum.
That would make sense, I don't know.
I don't, that's what's sticking in my mind. I've got to go see if I can find that now.
Well, but just,
Five would be a quorum.
it'd be a quorum, but that doesn't
Respect to the
mean,
meeting.
Yeah.
yeah, that would still be a quorum, but that doesn't mean you can't have 5 together.
Good, that makes it reasonable then.
So,
So again, my perception was it was good. I don't know if Kenny shares the same, or Sonny or Gordon, but that was my perception with the intent of trying to begin to build some trust, and some of the stuff is historical in nature. We've got to get behind us. That's my perspective.
okay. Any other comments?
I have one other thing. Actually, it's for Eric. I really appreciate the time you put in that. That was a much better display of information than sometimes we have seen. It was a lot of information in a very clear visual format, and I think it was a lot of information, good work. So
I appreciate it, thank you.
Mhm. Okay. If nothing else, adjourn to executive session. Yeah, motion. Jason, second. All in favor?